In today's video, we're going to learn how to install or upgrade Bizweaver. The only difference between the two processes is that if you do a fresh installation of Bizweaver, you're going to need to enter some credentials. In this case, we're actually upgrading, so a lot of the credentials will be pre-entered. So you will grab your installation files from the Third Wave portal, and there's going to be quite a few documents in here, most of them regarding release notes in different formats and the changelog from the last version. We're going to go ahead and open the setup.exe, and this is going to start the process of installation. Now, Bizweaver is a fairly light program. It doesn't need a lot of processing power. In this case, you really only need an x64 processor with 1.4 gigahertz or faster, 8 gigabytes RAM, and roughly 25 megabytes of disk space for the application itself. So it's a very lightweight program and is really quick to install fresh or upgrade from. So the first screen you're going to come to is the connection details. Now this is the server where Bizweaver is going to be installed. It can be the same one you're installing Bizweaver on or a separate one. You just need to enter the server details. The database, now when this is blank, we recommend you name all Bizweaver application databases BWX common and denote the server it's installed on if you have multiple installations. So in this case, it's Versago Test is a server it's installed on. BWX common is just a Bizweaver database. The username, password, that's for the database. We recommend Bizweaver has its own user or administration public access to that server so it can access all tables as needed and all databases as needed. And the default for keep all logs for is 5 days. We recommend 3, though. If you want more, you definitely can choose a larger interval. But for most installations for production instances, 3 is more than enough. And then the B1 installation ID is provided by Third Wave. Now, the next screen here is going to have all the workflow tools that are going to be installed on Bizweaver. Just keep them all checked unless told otherwise. And the next step here is for connecting Bizweaver to an external system. So you can execute workflows externally or from a remote application, most commonly from Versago, the partner application to Bizweaver. If you do not have anything to set up, or if it's not on the same server, you can skip this step here. Though if Versago was installed first, these credentials would be pre-filled automatically. Otherwise, you would continue through this step to set the IIS application up to connect to your external program. Though normally Versago and Bizweaver can be installed on different servers, and we'll just go ahead and skip this step for now, as it is not needed to complete the process. You can always skip that step. Now, once the installation is finished, we enter the program automatically. And normally on a fresh installation, you'll just have this Bizweaver task folder, and then you can create more folders as you go. But the one thing you're going to need to actually work with Bizweaver are connections. And connections are to external systems such as SQL or SAP through the DI API or DI server, and or REST connections through an e-commerce platform such as Shopify. So in this case, we're going to set up just a few of those so you can see the process. Now we'll start with a REST service. In this case, we're going to do Shopify. And when you create a name, always make it very unique so you know what the purpose of that connection is for. And there are 2 types of connections you can do for a REST service. One is a basic authentication, which in the case of Shopify is what we need, or an OAuth 2 authentication, which has, depending on your API, it may need this type of connection. Bizweaver only supports basic auth or OAuth 2, but that you can set those credentials in there. In this case, we're going to do basic authentication, so we're going to add our username and password for Shopify. Now when you save the connections here, it's going to save the connection, but it's not going to test them. All REST connections are actually validated at runtime. So that's something that when you actually connect to the API, you're going to need to check that through runtime. The next connection we're going to set up is a SQL connection. Now in this case, we're going to set up just to a normal database connection. So we're just going to make sure we name that. We're going to add our server, the database we want to connect to, and the username and password. When you connect to a SQL instance, we ask that Bizweaver has a public access to that server, so it can connect to all the databases on that server if you want to. Now, the next one we're going to set up is a DI API connection. Now, with the DI API connection, it's going to need a few more instances to actually, or a few more details to connect to it. So it's going to need the same information, such as where your instance of SAP is installed, the database that you want to connect to, the SQL type, which in this case it's 2017, and the username and password for both B1 and the database. Now, same thing as for connecting to a SQL connection, we ask that you give Bizweaver its own connection details, so it's not so you can. It's easier to troubleshoot problems if it has its own user within SAP. So once the credentials are entered, you're going to hit validate and save. And this will actually test the connection to make sure it is actually valid. So the connection is good. If there were any errors, it would let us know. And it wouldn't let us proceed or save that until we fix the issues. Now, once all those connections are saved, you can actually use them anywhere in a Bizweaver workflow, because they can be called as long as you use them in the requisite type of tool. So for example, SQL connections can only be used in a SQL tool. The DI API connections can only be used in your mapper and so forth. So you'll be able to use those credentials to complete or build workflows as needed. Now, that's all for this video. Thank you for watching and have a great day.